Now your turn, bitch. The entire martial arts gym went dead silent. Tyler, a 22-year-old black belt, had just tossed his gloves onto the mat. He pointed a trembling finger at the nurse who was busy taping a student's dislocated shoulder. Let's see if nurses can actually fight. A few students began to snicker. Someone pulled out a phone to record. The head coach stepped forward to stop the madness. But Sarah Mitchell stood up. She placed her medical kit beside the mat. She stepped onto the floor. No warm-up, no words. Tyler smirked. 30 seconds. 30 seconds later, nobody was laughing anymore. The setting was a high-intensity mixed martial arts gym in San Diego, located just a few miles from the massive naval base. The air inside was thick with the scent of old sweat, worn leather, and the heavy electric hum of youthful ambition. This was not a place for the weak or the faint of heart. It was a factory for fighters. The walls were covered in faded posters of legendary champions, and the floors were perpetually damp from the hard work of 50 men. On this humid Tuesday afternoon, the sound of rhythmic thuds against heavy bags filled the room like a war drum. Every student here was fighting for something, a title, a scholarship, or simply a way out of a difficult life. Because of the high rate of minor injuries during these intense sparring sessions, the gym had recently made a change. They had started inviting a professional medical consultant to be on site to handle the inevitable accidents. They needed someone who could handle everything from deep orbital cuts to pop joints without flinching. That person was Sarah Mitchell, and she was far more than she appeared to be at first glance. Sarah was 32 years old. To the casual observer, she looked like a typical nurse you'd find in any local clinic. She had a compact, athletic build, but she didn't possess the flashy, bulging muscles of the ring fighters. Her brown hair was pulled back into a low, sensible bun that never moved, no matter how much she moved. She wore standard light blue hospital scrubs and a calm, almost unreadable expression that made people uneasy. She arrived every day with a professional-grade medical bag and immediately went to work in her designated corner. Most of the young fighters ignored her completely. They saw her as a background character in their own movie. They saw her as a civilian who was only there to clean up their blood and hand out ice packs. They didn't see the way she moved, with a quiet, economical precision that suggested years of high-level training. They didn't notice the way her eyes scanned the room every 5 minutes, identifying every exit and potential hazard. It was a reflex. It was a survival instinct that had been drilled into her long before she ever set foot in this gym. Among the crowd was Tyler Grant. At 22, Tyler was the undisputed rising star of the San Diego MMA scene. He had recently earned his black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and had just won a local regional tournament with ease. He was fast, he was strong, and unfortunately, he was incredibly arrogant to the point of being toxic. Tyler believed that because he could win a trophy in a controlled ring, he was superior to everyone else in the room. He walked through the gym like he owned the air people breathed, constantly mocking those he deemed weaker than him. And today his target was the quiet woman in the blue scrubs who was minding her own business. Sarah was currently kneeling on the hard blue mat, carefully examining the shoulder of a teenage white belt. The kid had landed poorly during a takedown and was clearly in a significant amount of pain. Sarah was speaking in a soft, reassuring voice, checking his range of motion with expert, gentle hands. She wasn't just fixing his shoulder. She was calming his spirit, telling him he would be back on the mats in no time. Tyler walked over, dripping with sweat and a misplaced sense of ego. He stood over her, casting a long, dark shadow. "You know, the hospital is that way, right?" he mocked, pointing toward the street with a sneer. "This is a man's gym, honey. We don't really need a nurse hovering around like a worried grandmother." A few of Tyler's friends laughed, eager to stay in the good graces of the gym's top-ranked fighter. Sarah didn't even look up at first. She finished applying the kinesiotherapy tape to the student's injured shoulder. "I'm here to make sure these kids don't end up in my ER with permanent damage, Tyler," she said firmly. "You should focus on your footwork instead of my job. Your left heel is lifting too high on your roundhouse." Tyler's face flushed a deep, angry red. He didn't like being corrected by anyone, especially not just a nurse. He felt the need to reestablish his dominance in front of the younger students who were watching. Footwork? I'm a black belt. You're a lady with a bag of Band-Aids. Why don't you stick to the medicine cabinet? The teenage student looked uncomfortable, sensing the dangerous tension building between the two. Sarah stood up slowly, dusting off her scrubs. She looked Tyler directly in the eye with a piercing blue gaze. Her expression wasn't angry or fearful. It was something far more intimidating. It was completely unimpressed. Fighting is about discipline and self-control, Tyler, she said calmly, her voice carrying across the room. But you seem to be lacking the most important part of any martial art, the ability to respect others. Tyler sneered, playing to the crowd. He looked at the smartphones that were now recording the confrontation. He wanted a show. He wanted to humiliate her and prove that his black belt meant more than her presence. Respect is earned on the mat, not in a nursing school textbook. If you think you're so disciplined, why don't you prove it? In Tyler's arrogant mind, Sarah was a weak, easy target. He saw her clinical silence as a sign of deep-seated fear. He had no idea that in the real world, the most dangerous people are often the ones who have nothing to prove. He didn't realize that Sarah Mitchell had faced threats much larger than a 22-year-old with a trophy. She had looked into the eyes of death in places Tyler couldn't even find on a map. The gym grew quiet as the students stopped their training to watch the drama unfold in the center of the mats. Tyler felt the rush of power. He thought he was about to make a viral video of him schooling a nurse. He was about to learn a lesson that would change the trajectory of his entire life. And Sarah, she was simply ready to do what she had been trained to do. If you've ever seen a good person being treated like they are nothing, just because they choose to stay silent, type unjust. Tyler wasn't finished with his taunts. He wanted to push her until she cracked or fled the building in shame. He picked up his heavy sparring gloves and threw them onto the mat with a loud, echoing thud. "Now your turn, bitch," he repeated, his voice dripping with malice. "Step on the mat. Let's see the nurse fight. Let's see if that medical degree taught you how to take a punch as well as you give out aspirin." The head coach, a veteran fighter named Ramirez, finally stepped in to intervene. "That's enough, Tyler. Back off right now. Sarah is a guest and a professional in this gym." But Tyler laughed it off, feeling invincible under the gaze of the cameras. "Come on, coach. It's just a light spar. Unless the nurse is too scared to get her pretty scrubs dirty." The room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence that lasted for what felt like an eternity. Everyone was looking at Sarah Mitchell. They expected her to walk away and file a complaint. They expected her to be the victim in this story. But Sarah didn't move toward her medical bag. She looked past Tyler and addressed Coach Ramirez directly. Her voice was steady as a rock. "Is it okay if I use the mat for a moment, Coach?" she asked. Not a single tremor of nervousness. Not a single blink of hesitation in her eyes. Ramirez looked at her, searching her face for any sign of doubt. He saw a cold, calculated readiness. He saw a woman who had been in the zone many times before. "Sarah, you don't have to do this. He's a black belt, and he's significantly larger than you," Ramirez warned, his voice low. "I know exactly what he is, Coach," Sarah replied, her voice dropping an octave into a command tone. She began to unbutton her scrub top, revealing a black athletic compression shirt underneath. She kicked off her clogs and stepped onto the mat with the light, silent footsteps of a predator. "I just want to ensure Tyler understands that the world is much bigger than this four-wall gym." Ramirez sighed and stepped back, signaling the other students to clear the center of the room. "Fine. No strikes to the face. First person to tap or lose positional control loses. Understood?" Tyler was grinning ear to ear. He hopped onto the mat, bouncing on the balls of his feet. He was shadowboxing, showing off his explosive speed and his impressive reach. Sarah walked to the center of the mat. She didn't bounce. She didn't waste a single ounce of energy. She simply stood in a neutral, open stance. But Coach Ramirez noticed the subtle details immediately. The way she distributed her weight between her heels and her toes. The way her chin was tucked. The way her hands were held slightly open, ready to catch a limb or deflect a strike. This wasn't the stance of a sport martial artist. This was a ready state used by elite military. It was a stance designed for survival in the mud and the dark, not for scoring points on a scoreboard. You ready, nurse? Tyler taunted, stepping into his fighting stance. I'll go easy on you for 30 seconds. Start the clock, Sarah said. The buzzer sounded with a sharp, piercing ring. Tyler moved in instantly like a bolt of lightning. He wanted a quick, explosive takedown to embarrass her and end the fight before it even started. He lunged for her waist, reaching for a double-leg takedown with all his collegiate wrestling power. In his mind, he had already won. He was imagining the laughter of the crowd when she hit the mat, but Sarah Mitchell was no longer there. With a movement so subtle it was almost invisible, she pivoted. She moved on her left heel, rotating her body just inches away from Tyler's outstretched hands. Tyler's hands grasped at thin air. He stumbled forward, his own momentum carrying him past her. He looked like a confused bull chasing a ghost. Sarah didn't counterattack. She just reset. Tyler turned around, his confident grin fading into a mask of annoyance. Lucky move, he growled. He came in again, this time with a flurry of low, stinging kicks designed to deaden her legs. Sarah checked each one with her shins. Thwack, thwack, thwack. The sound of the impact was heavy and solid. It sounded like a baseball bat hitting a tree. Tyler's shins were starting to sting from the impact, but Sarah didn't even flinch or change her expression. She was observing him. She was analyzing his balance, his breathing, and his growing anger. She was waiting for the moment his ego took complete control of his technique. Ramirez watched from the sidelines, his arms crossed over his chest. He realized Tyler was in trouble. Tyler was fighting a sports match according to a set of rules he had practiced for years. Sarah Mitchell was analyzing a target in a high-stakes environment where rules didn't exist. Tyler grew frustrated. He swung a heavy, high roundhouse kick aimed at her ribs to end the match. Sarah didn't move back. She moved in, closing the distance and negating the power of the arc. She caught his leg under her arm and used a simple, devastatingly efficient trip of his standing leg. Tyler hit the mat hard. Oof! The sound of his breath leaving his lungs was audible to everyone. The students stopped laughing. The phones were still recording, but the mocking comments had died. Tyler scrambled back to his feet, his face twisted in a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. He had been embarrassed in front of his peers by a woman in scrubs. You're dead, Tyler screamed, losing all his years of training and mental discipline. He charged like a wild animal, forgetting every technique he had ever learned. Sarah stayed perfectly still. She waited until the very last millisecond before the collision. The air in the room seemed to vibrate with the tension of the coming moment. She wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was a weapon that had been unsheathed. If you've ever realized you made a massive mistake by judging someone based on their job, type, I was wrong. Tyler's blind rage was his ultimate downfall. As he charged, he threw a desperate, overhand right punch. It was a powerful strike, but it was whistling, sloppy, and telegraphed to the entire world. Sarah didn't block it with force. She parried it with the grace of a seasoned veteran. She deflected his arm upward, stepping into his blind spot where his power was at its weakest. In one fluid, lightning-fast motion, she seized his collar and his wrist. Using Tyler's own massive forward weight against him, she performed a perfect lateral drop throw. Tyler didn't just fall, he was launched into the air. He hit the mat so hard the entire building shook. Before he could even process the impact, Sarah was on top of him like a mountain. But she wasn't punching him. She was controlling every single inch of his body. She had his arm locked in a Kimura grip, a shoulder lock that was nearing the breaking point. Her knee was pressed firmly into his solar plexus, pinning him like an insect to a laboratory board. Tyler struggled with everything he had. He tried to bridge. He tried to use his superior strength. But Sarah's weight distribution was flawless. Every time he tried to move, she tightened the grip. The pain was rising, and Tyler's face was turning a deep shade of purple from the lack of air. Tap, Tyler, she said. Her voice was as calm as if she were reading a heart rate monitor. This doesn't have to end with a trip to the surgery center. Never, shit, Tyler hissed through gritted teeth, his ego still fighting the reality of the situation. Sarah applied just 5% more pressure to the shoulder joint. The tendons in Tyler's shoulder began to creak and groan. The pain was immediate and blinding. Tyler realized in that moment that Sarah could snap his arm like a dry twig if she wanted to. He realized she wasn't playing a game. She was controlling his life. He tapped. Fast. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of surrender was the only noise in the gym. Sarah released him instantly and stood up. She brushed off her black shirt and walked away. She went straight back to her medical kit as if she had just finished a routine checkup. The gym was so quiet you could hear the hum of the overhead lights and the distant sound of traffic. Tyler stayed on the mat for a long time, clutching his shoulder and staring at the ceiling. His ego was shattered. His reputation, which he had spent years building, was in pieces on the floor. Coach Ramirez walked onto the mat, but he didn't look at his star student. He looked at Sarah. "Where did you learn that, Mitchell? That wasn't sport jiu-jitsu. That was CQB. Close quarters battle. I haven't seen that since I was in the service." Sarah stopped packing her bag. She looked at the group of students who were staring at her. "I didn't learn it in a high-priced gym with a referee," she said quietly, her voice echoing. "Then where?" a student asked, his voice full of a new profound respect. "I spent 8 years in the United States Navy," Sarah replied, standing tall. "I was a hospital corpsman, but I wasn't sitting in a comfortable clinic in San Diego. I was attached to a SEAL delivery vehicle team. I was a combat medic in the field." The room inhaled collectively. A Navy SEAL combat medic. One of the most elite, highly trained positions in the entire global military infrastructure. These were the people who went into the darkest parts of the world to pull their brothers out of the fire. They were trained to fight like devils so they could heal like angels. "I've had to perform emergency surgery in the back of a moving Humvee while taking heavy fire. I've had to carry a 200-pound man through a swamp while my own leg was bleeding." She looked at Tyler, who was now sitting up on the mat. "I didn't train to win gold medals or trophies for a social media page, Tyler. I trained so that I and the men to my left and right could come home to see our families. In my world, there are no 30-second matches. There is only the mission and survival." Tyler finally looked up. The arrogance was completely gone. He looked small and incredibly young. I had no idea who you were. I am so sorry." "That's the entire point, Tyler," Sarah said. "You never truly know who is standing in front of you. You saw a nurse. You saw someone you thought was weak because I chose to heal instead of hurt. But in the real world, the healers are the toughest ones of all. We have to be." Sarah finished zipping her bag. She didn't wait for applause or an apology. She walked toward the exit, her head held high. "Wait," Tyler called out. He stood up, his arms still hanging limp at his side. He walked toward her and bowed deeply, a gesture of true martial arts respect. "I was a fool. Please. I want to learn. I want to know how to be a real protector." And Sarah looked at him for a long time. She saw the change in his eyes. "Humility is the first lesson of any warrior, Tyler. You just started your real training today." The students watched her leave the building. The video that was meant to be a joke was now a legend. Sarah Mitchell wasn't just a nurse. She was a silent guardian who had traded a rifle for a kit. But Tyler was about to learn that Sarah's lessons didn't stop when she left the gym. The real world was about to test him in a way a sparring match never could. If you've ever been humbled by someone who was much stronger than they appeared, type, "I am indebted." 3 days had passed since the incident at the gym. Tyler had been remarkably quiet. He spent his time training harder than ever, but with a new somber sense of focus. He stopped talking trash to the new students. He started helping the white belts with their grips. He was a different man, but the city of San Diego was still a dangerous place at night. Late Friday night, Tyler was leaving the gym after an extra-long solo training session. The sun had long since set, and the parking lot was dimly lit by a single flickering lamp. To get to his car, he had to walk through a narrow concrete alleyway behind a row of warehouses. Suddenly, 3 men stepped out from behind a rusted dumpster. They didn't look like martial artists. They looked like experienced predators. One of them held a heavy iron pipe. Another had a long, jagged switchblade that caught the light. "Wallet and phone, kid," the one with the pipe growled, his voice low and gravelly. "Don't try anything funny. We've been watching you leave this gym for a week." Tyler froze. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He was a black belt, yes. He knew how to fight on a clean mat with a referee and a buzzer. But this was different. This was cold steel and hard concrete. This was 3-on-1 in the dark. The rules of the gym didn't apply here. There was no tapping out in a dark alley. I don't want any trouble, just take the money, Tyler said, his voice shaking with real fear. Too late for that, pretty boy, the man with the knife said. He lunged forward. Tyler managed to parry the first strike, but the man with the pipe swung hard. The heavy iron caught Tyler in the ribs with a sickening crack. Tyler went down, gasping for air as the world spun around him. The three men swarmed him, kicking him while he was on the ground. It was brutal. Suddenly, the blinding beams of a car's headlights flooded the narrow alleyway. A black SUV screeched to a halt just inches away from the dumpster. A figure stepped out of the driver's side. Even in the shadows, Tyler recognized her. It was Sarah Mitchell. She wasn't wearing scrubs. She was wearing tactical boots and a jacket. "Step away from the boy," she said. Her voice wasn't soft or clinical. It was a low, dangerous growl, the sound of a predator protecting its territory. The thugs laughed, thinking she was an easy target. "Get lost, lady. This ain't your business." Sarah didn't argue. She didn't call the police. She didn't wait for them to make a move. She moved first. And she didn't use sport jiu-jitsu. She used the lethal force training of a Navy SEAL combat veteran. She closed the distance to the man with the pipe before he could even raise his weapon. She struck his throat with a precision palm strike, then swept his legs out from under him. He hit the concrete with a thud and didn't get back up. The man with the knife charged. Sarah caught his wrist, twisted it until the bone groaned, and disarmed him in a second. She followed up with a palm strike to his solar plexus that folded him like a piece of paper. The third man didn't wait to find out what would happen to him. He ran into the night. It was over in less than 10 seconds. It was a masterclass in controlled violence. Sarah didn't chase the runner. She immediately knelt next to Tyler on the ground. Her warrior mode switched off, and her medic mode switched on instantly. "Stay still, Tyler," she commanded. Her hands were already checking his ribs and his pupils. "You have a cracked rib and a minor concussion. I have a trauma kit in the car." Tyler looked up at her, blood trickling from his split lip. He realized that the spar in the gym was her being incredibly gentle with him. This was the real Sarah Mitchell, the woman who walked through fire. "You followed me?" Tyler whispered, his voice weak. "I saw them hanging around the parking lot when I was leaving," Sarah said. "I knew they were looking for an easy target. I didn't realize it would be the star student." Tyler closed his eyes in a mixture of pain and deep-seated shame. "I couldn't do anything, Sarah. My black belt meant nothing out here. On the mat, it's a sport, Tyler," Sarah said softly as she began to wrap his torso. "In this alley, it's survival. Never confuse the two again." She helped him into her car with the strength of a soldier. She didn't mock him. She didn't tell him, "I told you so." She just took care of him. Tyler finally understood. She had beaten him once, and now she had saved him twice. If this story reminds you that real heroes don't just win fights, they save lives, type, "I will be kind." A week later, Tyler Grant finally returned to the gym. He wasn't wearing his medals. He wasn't acting like the king of the mat anymore. He walked with a slight limp. He walked straight to the corner where Sarah was setting up her medical station. He didn't say a word at first. He just handed her a small handwritten envelope. Inside was a receipt for a large donation to a veterans charity in her name, and a simple note that said, "Thank you for teaching me how to see the world." Tyler began to change in ways the other students couldn't believe. He became the most disciplined student Coach Ramirez had ever seen in 20 years. He stopped fighting for his own ego. He started fighting for a purpose. He eventually went on to join the Coast Guard, hoping to become a rescue swimmer. He wanted to be a healer who could fight, just like the woman who saved him. Sarah Mitchell continued to serve as the gym's nurse for many years. She never spoke about the incident in the alleyway. She didn't need to. She never spoke about her time in the SEALs unless a student truly needed to hear it. The gym changed too. The toxic bro culture vanished almost overnight. It became a place of mutual respect and quiet discipline. The students learned that the person cleaning the mats might be a hero. The person taping the ankles might be a warrior. You never truly know. Strength is not about how many people you can knock down in a ring. It is about how many people you can pick up and carry when they are at their lowest. It's about having the power of a lion, but the humble heart of a servant. Sarah Mitchell proved that you can be a Navy SEAL and a nurse. You can be a warrior and a healer. You don't have to choose one over the other, because the greatest weapon in any fight isn't a fist, a blade, or a gun. It is a heart that refuses to quit and a soul that knows when to fight and when to care. Sarah Mitchell's story serves as a permanent reminder to everyone who hears it. Don't be fooled by the scrubs. Don't be fooled by the silence of the humble. Beneath the surface of the most ordinary people, there often lies an extraordinary history. Respect isn't just something you give to the person with the loudest voice. Respect is what you owe to every human being you encounter on your journey, because you never know who has walked through fire to be standing right here today. Tyler Grant learned that lesson the hard way, but it made him a great man. And Sarah, she just kept doing what she does best every single day. She kept healing the wounded, and she kept watching over the innocent. She was a warrior in the shadows and a healer in the light. And that is the true definition of a hero. If you believe that true strength is found in humility and the will to protect others, type respect. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel SN Touching Stories for more powerful, true, and inspiring stories about the heroes among us. Thank you for watching.